From the heavens to the earth. The river Ganga is a sacred river that has been worshipped for thousands of years. In Sanatan Dharma, the river was brought down to earth by a king named Bhagirath. Because of that river, Ganga is also called Bhagirathi. Though it is said that Ganga comes from the Brahma Lok onto Lord Shiva's head and from there on following Bhagirath, Ganga is not said to be a Devtanam of Lord Shiva. The bringing down of the Ganga river from the heights of the Himalayas was a hydraulic, civil, river engineering feat of those days, accomplished with a gigantic effort that spanned 5 generations. From literary sources, geography, geology, British records, and the works of many researchers who have tried to unravel the legend of Ganga, let us now see how Ganga is the Prayatnam of Bhagirath, the physical effort, an extraordinary effort of Bhagirath to bring the Ganga through his kingdom to the seas. King Bahu of the Ikshvaku dynasty was not concerned about the welfare of his subjects or the protection of his kingdom. He would often be found drunk or gambling, or both, and in no state to rule. Knowing that the kingdom was weak, another king waged war against Bahu. He escaped to the forest with his 2 wives and took shelter in the ashram of the sage Bhargav. To make matters worse, one of his wives was pregnant, and during this stressful time, the other wife became jealous and poisoned the first, despite knowing that she was with a child. However, sage Bhargav learnt of this and rushed to the woman's rescue. He did his best to drain the poison from her body, but it could not be removed completely, and the baby was born with traces of poison in his blood. So the baby boy was named Sagra, which also means with the poison. Sagra grew up receiving an excellent education and art of warfare. Over time, he regained his father's lost kingdom and became a wonderful king. He had 2 wives. The first wife gave birth to a baby boy named Asmanjasa, while the second wife performed a dedicated penance and was blessed with 60,000 children. These children collectively dug a pond which in time turned into an ocean. That is why the ocean is also called Sagra, for the sons of Sagra. Asmanjasa turned out to be like his grandfather, Bahu, and so did his 60,000 step-brothers. Sagra struggled to mold his children into worthy future kings. Meanwhile, in an attempt to establish supremacy, King Sagra decided to perform the Ashwamedha Yagna. During this process, a king's horse is allowed to wander around for a year. Wherever the horse goes, the king of that land either accepts the sovereignty of the master of the horse or challenges him. Once the horse returns to his master's kingdom, the king's status gets elevated to that of an undisputed sovereign. Lord Indra learnt of Sagra's plans and, fearful of the consequences, kidnapped the horse. The 60,000 children searched far and wide for the horse, but with no luck. After some time, they came across a meditating sage, Kapila. They stopped there, and one of them asked the sage if he had seen the horse, to which the sage did not reply because he was in deep meditation. But the children took the lack of response as an insult and began hitting the sage. Kapila finally broke his meditation and opened his eyes. They were red with anger. With one glance, all of them were reduced to ashes. When King Sagra learnt of the demise of his children, he rushed to sage Kapila. Folding his hands, he requested him, "Honored sage, I am aware that my children have made a grave mistake, but they have also done some good in their lives, including the creation of an ocean that sustains life. I beg you not to deprive them of attaining moksha." Kapila was a kind sage. He replied, "For your children to attain moksha, the river Ganga must flow over their ashes. Only then can they go to heaven." So the king offered penance to the gods in the hope of convincing them to let the river Ganga flow down to the earth and over his children's ashes. But Sagra died before his penance was complete, and the task remained incomplete for a long time. Many years down the line, Bhagirtha was born in the same clan and ascended the throne. He learned of the story of sage Kapila and his ancestors, and decided to pray to the Lord to beg for their salvation. Vishnu appeared and said, Bhagirtha, the path has been set. You must convince Ganga to flow over their ashes. You must pray to her. Inspired, Bhagirtha began praying to Ganga, who originated at the feet of Lord Vishnu. He was aware that it was a Herculean task to convince her to descend from the heavens to the earth, and he put his heart and soul into his tapasya. Finally, Ganga appeared one day. On hearing his request, she said, The force of my waters is too much for the earthly realm to sustain. Pray to Lord Shiva and ask him to reduce my spate so that the earth does not get washed away. Thus, Bhagirtha began another tapasya until Shiva finally appeared. He offered to let Ganga flow through his hair and only then descend to the earth. As Ganga rushed down, Shiva tied up his hair, letting just one stream escape and flow down to the earth. From that day on, Shiva came to be known as Gangadhara, and Ganga came to be known as Bhagirathi because of Bhagirtha's great penance to both Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu. Despite Shiva's strategy, that the force of the Ganga was so strong that when she reached earth, the gush of the water flooded the ashram of the sage Janu. Janu became so livid at the destruction that he drank the river and Ganga could not proceed further. When Bhagirtha learnt of this development, he became disheartened and prayed earnestly to the sage as well as to Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. Finally, the sage gave in and released Ganga through his ears. This is why Ganga is also known as Jahnavi. The river eventually flowed over the ashes of Sagara's children, and they attained salvation. People in India still believe that if the dead's ashes are immersed in the Ganga or if a dying person receives the holy water before death, he or she will achieve salvation. In history, what is today called the Bay of Bengal was known as Ganga Sagara or Purva Samudra, and the Arabian Sea was referred to as Sindhu Sagara or Paschim Samudra. The Ganga originates from a glacier in the Himalayas called Gomukh, a cow's mouth, a little beyond the town of Gangotri, and merges with the sea at the Bay of Bengal. Many rivers such as Alka, Nanda, Yamuna, Saraswati, Sarayu, Gandak and others join Ganga on her journey. A rock at Gangotri marks the spot where Bhagirtha did his tapasya, along with statues of Bhagirtha and Ganga. Similar statues can also be seen at Sage Kapila's ashram in West Bengal. It is noteworthy that Bhagirtha's continuous penance led to the coining of the phrase Bhagirtha Prayatnam, which is used to denote the effort required to be put into a Herculean task. In the Puranic text, Lord Shiva's head is equated with the ancient Bindu Sarovar lake. The text speaks of 6 rivers flowing out of this Bindu Sarovar, 3 flows to the east namely Haladani, Bhavani, and Nalni and 3 flows to the west namely Sita, Sucheksha. It was from this Bindu Sarovar that Bhagirath brought the 7th river to the south, which is the Ganga. Then what was Bhagirath's need in those ancient days to bring forth the 7th river, when 6 rivers already flowed from Bindu Sarovar? To answer this question, we must first consider the geography of North India. We had rivers such as Sindhu and Saraswati that were west flowing. To the east of these rivers we have the Aravali Hill Range, which is one of the oldest and hardest rock formations. The Vindhyachal mountain range is located in the south and the east. We had the remains of the Teddy Sea, which covered most of the present-day Bengal, and the arms of the sea-stretched islands. Mountain rivers flowed into the remains of these 2 arms, leaving the land in between a desert. In the 1800s and during the early part of the 1900s, many British surveyors have extensively surveyed the Indian rivers Ganga, Yamuna, Brahmaputra and other rivers originating from the Himalayas. One of the first recorded expeditions in the Himalayas occurred in 1817 by Captain Herbert, a British geologist. In his commentaries, he mainly focused on 3 places in the upper reaches of the Ganga at Dhali, which is almost above Gangotri. He noticed a huge accumulation of boulders and believed that they were not created by the weathering of waters from Ganga alone. He also thought that something else was involved to shape these boulders. In the part of his paper, where he summarized the source of the Ganga River. He states that the hand of man, and not nature alone, has been at work in carving the headwater of the Ganga. In his book, William Wilcox states that ancient Indian writers wrote about physical facts in a spiritual manner. So for us, they sound like mythological stories. When history is too old, it becomes mythology. Every canal that went southward, whether it became big as Bhagirathi River or not, originally started out as a canal. These canals were lined, dug out and placed at distances that canals should be placed. In the end, Sir William Wilcox argues that the Ganga or Bhagirathi River was a canal built by ancient Indians. The arrival of the Ganges from the roofs of the world to the plains of India would be considered the greatest feat of engineering in India or even in the history of mankind. Yatnam means effort, Prayatnam means extraordinary effort, and Devtanam means divine miracle. The efforts to bring the Ganga down from Himalayan mountains are referred as Prayatnam of Bhagirath. It means it's not a natural miracle. Bhagirath did put physical efforts to bring down Ganga, which in a way means engineering efforts included. Subscribe and like and share with your family.